We're here in the Space Station Flight Control Room, and today joining us is a special guest, Hal Getzelman, who is the lead Capcom as well as the chief engineer for the Capcom. Thanks so much for joining us.
I'm glad to be here, Nicole.
It's been a busy day here in the Flight Control Room, so we're really glad you're here to kind of talk to us. So a lot of people have heard about Capcoms. They're familiar with that console position. I always describe it as the voice of the flight control team. But can you tell us a little bit more about what that job entails?
Well, really, we're just another member of the team. We work for the flight director. But our job is to listen to what all the experts on the control team are talking about, understand as best we can what impact that will have on the crew, and then communicate those impacts. Sometimes those impacts are significant, and we have to have the crew react to those problems or issues. And so we try to boil it down to the essential information that perhaps the controllers are talking in a language that is not familiar to the crew, and we translate that into information that's useful and then that they can act on.
The other thing that I think is important that some people may not realize about the Capcom position is that you are representing the crew office. You're working behind the scenes on days that you're not on console on procedures and that type of thing. You have the chief role for that within the Capcom office. Can you talk a little bit about that scope of the job?
Yeah, we have a whole group of engineers that support the crew and review their procedures and displays and make sure that those are as good as we can make them. A lot of the work we do, we're scheduling continually doing that work, so we have particular expertise that we bring to that equation. We have a increment lead Capcom. They follow the crew scheduling. They participate and give input to the scheduling process. Also, we review the procedures that are going to be uplinked to the crew to make sure that they're easy to understand. They have the proper illustrations, the proper call-outs, and all that information as part of our job.
Why don't you tell us what's the most fun or something unexpected that we might not think is the most enjoyable aspect of being a Capcom?
Well, I guess the thing that's been kind of fun for me is the fact that I think I've introduced the Chancellor of Germany, the Prime Minister of Japan, the President of the United States. I've introduced all these people to the crew on orbit over the years that I've been doing this. So that's kind of a kick when you think about it, that we're of big interest to national leaders, and they want to talk to our crew, and we get to play a small role in that process.
Absolutely. We've had lots of VIPs and dignitaries and the occasional celebrities that come through, so I hadn't thought about that aspect. What about the flip side of that? What's the most challenging aspect of being a Capcom?
Well, the most challenging aspect is just to communicate effectively all the time. We serve fairly long shifts, we serve odd hours, and to try to keep on top of situations, to try to juggle all the activities that we do, managing the crew's timeline, thinking of the particular ways to help the crew out, try to stay ahead of them. Those are the challenging aspects of the job.
And one thing I've always been curious, the Capcoms are responsible for knowing a lot of the same systems. In a lot of cases, they do the sims for the spacewalks with the crew so that everybody's a really integrated team. So I think that's another kind of the unseen side of the story that, Capcoms are really responsible for a lot.
Yeah, I mean, that's really the key expertise that we bring to the control team is the mindset of the crew. And all of our other controllers here are experts in their particular systems, whether that be thermal control or environmental control or attitude control of the vehicle. We bring the expertise of the crew perspective. And so that means not only knowing how the crew does their job, but also some of the personalities of the crews and how they like to work. So when we have some decisions in real time about whether we should work a little late today or save that work for tomorrow, is the person tired or whatever, we help make that decision, help contribute to making that decision.
One last question. In your previous life, you were with the Air Force, and you've had a lot of flying experience. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and the path to working here at NASA?
Well, like a lot of people, I'm old enough to remember the early missions of space, and I can remember Apollo 8 going around the moon. And when I watched that on Christmas Eve, I was just mesmerized and thought this would be something that I wanted to do. And when I looked around at all the astronauts at that point, they were all military test pilots. And so I thought my path to getting into space would be to become a military test pilot. And so I went to the Air Force Academy, got a degree in mechanical engineering, went on to fly a lot of different airplanes. Most are no longer being flown by the Air Force. Tried to do the best I could in all those. I went to graduate school, got a degree in space operations, and then came down here to work at the Johnson Space Center for 2 years in the training division. And then we kind of decided after Challenger to separate military space from civilian space, and I went back to flying in Korea and then back in America. I served in the first Gulf War flying F-15s, and then eventually ended up as an instructor pilot teaching new students out in Lubbock, Texas. And then after I retired, I came back down here and eventually worked into the job I have today as a Capcom.
It's a fascinating background. Thanks so much for taking time to join us. Again, this is Hal Getzelman, the lead Capcom and chief engineer for the Capcom office.